we sort of send people to therapists when they're sad. And those therapists are not trained in grief and loss. I mean, nobody's trained in grief and loss. So you go for your sad hour with your therapist, and you probably feel better because it's helpful to talk about it. But that therapist doesn't know what to do because they haven't been trained what to do, the same way I didn't know what to do. And then you come out and you have 23 more hours of today to get through with your loss. And then you've got 6 more days in the week before you're going to get even a thimbleful of help, when what you need is like a river.
Welcome to Season 4 of the Widow Podcast. I'm Karen Sutton, the Widow Coach, and I'll be supporting you through the loss of your life partner so you can find a more positive way through your grief. Whether this is your first episode or you've been with me for a while, I want you to know you are capable of creating something meaningful after loss. And you don't have to do it alone. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Widow Podcast. Today I have the gorgeous Meghan Riordan Jarvis. Meghan is, oh my God, so many things. Okay, we've got a list to get through here. If I've missed anything off, you just shout out, Meghan. But you are it's part of the list of things. A trauma-trained psychotherapist, a grief and loss specialist. You are a TEDx speaker. You are a podcast host of Grief is My Side Hustle. What a great name for a podcast. I love it. You have created the Grief Mentor Method, and you are an author as well. You've written 2 books. Your first book was titled End of the Hour, which is a memoir. And then your second book is titled Can Anyone Tell Me, which if you are watching this, you'll be able to see it behind Meghan there, which is incredible. And we will get on to the books, of course. But Meghan, oh my God, it's such an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us.
Oh, we've only just started and I'm already having a great time. So thank you for having me.
So lovely, so lovely. So that's a long list of things. How did you get into all of this? Where did it start?
What I say when I look back on my life sometimes is like I back-assed my way into a bunch of things. Like there are people who are like, I sat down and I made a plan. I'm like, oh, I also made a plan, but that's not what I'm doing. So I had intended on being a preschool teacher. That's what I went to college for, studied to teach kids how to learn, and got a developmental education degree, and also decided that I was going to move from Massachusetts, where I was, to DC while I was in the midst of like my first great love affair. And that fell apart. And it fell apart in this way that, like, to me, I was never going to not be interested in talking about how broken my heart was. My new friends were a little less interested in that and a little more like, can we go dance on tables somewhere? So I went to a therapist mostly because I was afraid that like I was exhausting the mental capacity of the people around me. And also I didn't really understand why a breakup made me feel like it was the end of my life. Fast forward quickly, I learned in therapy that this death that had happened when I was young, I was 9 when someone who was really beloved to my family and my whole community drowned while I was at the beach and my family was at the beach. And it was in a summer community, like, going to Cornwall, having a house in Cornwall, and then going back to your normal community. So the summer community was devastated. When I went back to school, which was only 3 weeks later, no one had any idea what had happened. And I was 9, so we just didn't talk about it. And so I learned from this therapist that there are consequences to not talking about grief. There are consequences to carrying unresolved grief in your system. And you then sort of approach the world in a way that you are not so aware of, right? So it's, I don't know, it's like growing up in an environment where it's cold all the time. Those are the clothes you wear. You wear clothes because it's cold all the time. While I was living in DC, I went back to social work school. I met my husband. I started a private practice. It wasn't focused in grief and loss. It was focused, and it wasn't even focused in trauma. It just sort of started to grow. And as my clients came, I was like, oh, I better get trained in this to work with this client, or I better get And soon I'd done tons of training, and I really understood that like every conversation I was having was about some element of disconnection. When I'm working with somebody and they're in recovery, we were looking at all the various ways in which they were disconnected and what was the root of disconnection. So it could be they're trying not to drink. Why did they start drinking? They started drinking because they were anxious at work. We follow it all the way back, and there's some sense of disconnection to wholeness, disconnection to self, disconnection to community. And when you look at what disconnection really is about, it's about a loss of some kind. And for me, it was a romantic loss, an attachment, but it's a loss. And what we haven't really ever taught anyone and anywhere ever is what do we do to attend to loss other than like grip and bear it?
Yes.
What do we do? And so I got to hear because in 2016, my dad was diagnosed with small cell cancer. He died a year later, which was what sort of the medical world predicted. And while it was very sad and very hard, I sort of participated in his death. And it was kind of also beautiful. When 2 years later, almost exactly, my mom died in her sleep suddenly while I was on vacation with her. And that was like waking up and discovering that I lived in a totally foreign country where there was a war going on. I got really sick really fast. I suffered with ruminations. And by this point, I had trained in PTSD and was working with people with very complicated systems of functioning and symptoms that were really dysregulating. So I knew that this thought that I had the moment I heard that my mom died, the thought I had was it's my fault that she died. And I was like, oh, that's a rumination. I know what that is. And ruminations, it doesn't sound bad, but they can be very bad. They can really, really make you ill. And so your mind locks onto a thought and you kind of like hold it in your hands like Gollum in with the ring in The Hobbit, and you can't let go of it. And it really does a number on you, which is what happened to me. And so then I checked myself into an inpatient facility where I have been sending clients who need that next level of care. I checked myself in there, and I was there for 3 weeks doing all the treatments that I normally provide to other folks. And actually this is today is 6 years of my mom's death. So what I've been thinking about recently is not so much how much I miss my mom and her being dead, but I have been thinking about, God, I was so unwell. I became so unwell with my grief, and it was terrifying because the person I knew who was the most expertise in grief was myself. And so when I went into treatment, I came out the other side and was like, God, I don't think we really tell the truth about this shit. I don't think I've been telling the truth because I wasn't taught the truth. And I need to understand, like, what has my lived experience not match up with the bullshit that we say? What has my lived experience of this? Like, what do I want people to walk away with? And so it's important for me to say, like, I think most grief is not the sort of traumatization experience where you have to check yourself into a hospital the way that I had. Mine was, there were shards of my childhood lost. My dad had only died 2 years later. The way in which my central nervous system became very unwell, I don't think is common, but I think it's more common than the statistics would tell us. Either way, I think people need to know the difference. I think you need to know the difference between how do I, in this country, we sort of send people to therapists when they're sad. And those therapists are not trained in grief and loss. I mean, nobody's trained in grief and loss. So you go for your sad hour with your therapist, and you probably feel better because it's helpful to talk about it. But that therapist doesn't know what to do because they haven't been trained what to do, the same way I didn't know what to do. And then you come out and you have 23 more hours of today to get through with your loss. And then you've got 6 more days in the week before you're going to get even a thimble full of help when what you need is like a river. Yeah. And so I really came to this, like, I just like got mad as hell about it and was like, it is. And still, I mean, I would say this, Karen, like, I think it is batshit crazy that every single one of us will go through some kind of profound loss, not the one you had, not the one I had, but their very own, and have no resources, have nothing. No. If you said to me right now, Meghan, you need to go to an AA meeting by 7:00 tonight, there are 10 like 2 within walking distance of my house. And that would just be to support me in addiction, right? Well, what's at the root of addiction? At the root of addiction are feelings that we cannot tolerate, therefore we medicate them, and also addiction, which is an actual disease.
Yeah.
But what's at the root of it? At the root of it is pain. And so we have ways we do it in, pain clinics. Like we have ways that we can support people in pain, but we don't do it with grief and loss. So how did I get from here to there? And that's it. I just got mad when I came out and started asking people lots of questions. I started reading books. I was like, somebody somewhere must have done this. And I shouldn't say nobody's doing it, because there are lots of people that are making some sorts of efforts towards doing it. But my real belief is that there is a biophysical reaction to disconnection. It's scientifically proven. Mary Frances O'Connor, her book talks a lot about this. But, we have a whole hormonal reaction to falling in love. We have a whole hormonal reaction to discovering that person is no longer here.
Yes.
Or divorced, or you didn't get into college, and we don't teach people how to help themselves in those bodies at that time. So that's where I start. Where I start is, how do you be in a body? How do you be in a body and a life that you have no idea how to be in?
And it's really hard, isn't it? Because I think we all put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and I think we are very misinformed about grief and what it is. And I've shared this before on the podcast. Before my husband died, I was a nurse and a midwife. I'd been around death and loss, and thought I had a bit of an idea. I'd kind of lost my grandparents, and I really didn't. It was ridiculous. So we have this expectation, but the expectation, I don't know, I'm assuming, did you have, because you had all the knowledge?
Oh my God, I was horrified. I've never been more angry about anything I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I have 2 master's degrees, like $100,000 worth of training. But to be honest, that's why I ended up writing my memoir about it, End of the Hour, because I really wanted people to understand that, like, you can have all the training. You could be wearing 700 life preservers. That's not going to stop you from falling in the water. If the boat goes over, you're going to get wet, sister. Life preservers do not stop you from getting wet. They might keep you from dying. So there were some things, like I had a hand up in some of this, meaning I knew I was sick really early. Yeah. Most people who come to see me to help with treatment, they have been suffering with their symptoms for at least 18 months. Wow. And those symptoms are a bit like when ice forms, like over time, it's like harder that you didn't get treatment sooner. I knew I needed treatment within like 3 months. I was like, oh, that does not mean I wanted treatment. It does not mean I was happy about it. It does not mean that I was a good patient. But I knew I needed it, and I knew what number to call. I literally knew the people who could help me. I didn't call them directly. I called a colleague, and she was like, you know what you need to do. And I did know what I need to do. Most people have no idea what if you need treatment, what should people be trained in? What does it look like? And if that doesn't work, what do I do? And how do I find those people? So in my book, Can Anyone Tell Me, for people who are in the US, that was the one chapter that my publishers were like, this chapter is going to date itself really fast. And I was like, I don't care. Can you just please? But it tells people at least what people should be trained in. And it does walk you through, like, this is one way that you might be able to find a therapist. Because most emails that I get are from people who are like, I heard you on a podcast. I have all the symptoms you're talking about. Can you help me find a therapist? But if I spent all my time helping those people find a therapist, I wouldn't be able to do anything else. So I needed there to be a better method. And the truth of the matter is, therapists are not trained in grief and loss. They're getting training. There are people like Claire Bidwell Smith and David Kessler who are offering those trainings, but not to the scale of 8 billion people.
No. And it's difficult, isn't it? I've done David Kessler's Grief Educators program, but again, it's amazing, and you can learn so much and from reading all the books, but it is so different for everyone, isn't it? There is no answer, is there? Because how do we grieve well? How do we grieve in a way that allows us to support ourselves from a place of kindness and
See,
compassion?
I think there is an answer to this.
Mm,
One of the things that people meet me with all the time is like, this grief is not the same as that grief. So those people can't be in the same room together. And, or every single human person is so different. That's why we don't do it. That is not why we don't do it. Every single human person is different. And yet we teach nutrition. We teach basic nutrition. Like, these are the macronutrients that need to be in your body.
yeah.
We teach sex, like this is what sex is, and this is what happens in the body. We teach, how to work out. We teach how to run a 5K. We teach a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
I'm going to give you general information, and you're going to have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
So I actually think it's helpful to distinguish, right? If you go all the way to the root, which is like, what's the problem? Grief is not a problem. Grief is just a developmental experience that everyone's going to have. I define grief as the energy that's created inside your body on account of your loss, which means you're really the expert in it. So when people are like, well, you're a grief expert, I'm like, you are also a grief expert. You are the expert in your grief. So I don't actually, when I'm teaching, tell people what to do to grieve as a verb. So your grief is the noun. The grieving part is the part that we need to lean into your instincts. And I give people a scaffolding. That's what the grief mentor method is. It's 6 core components. So it's 6 areas of focus. Because when people are grieving, their brain is really compromised. It's not a good time to learn. Yeah. But they need something. They need something, right? So like I'm thinking about, I had this whole metabolic syndrome when my 3rd child was born. My body was like, enough, and it sort of crapped out, and I couldn't digest food, and I couldn't sleep. And I saw a nutritionist, and she was like, okay, we're going to try a bunch of stuff. So one of the things we tried was, like, I was eating all these weird grains, and I was like, this is giving me a stomach ache. I was like, okay, well then don't eat that. Grief, the energy is there. We need to know what it is. Where does it live in your body? What does it feel like? Is it sadness for you? My grief was anger. So what is the constellation of the energetic experience of grief for you? Is it hopelessness? Is it helplessness? Is it disconnection? Is it isolation? What is it? And then we move to, okay, how are we going to move that energy through your system? Not because it's bad and we need to get it out. Because guess what? This is an ever-filling cup. It's that you do need to be able to move the energy through the system so that there's space for something other than grief to exist. Yeah. And so we have these 6 core components, which are working on mindfulness and movement. So that's like just, being in touch with the energy and moving it through the body. Energy, teaching people that there's a difference between anxious grief and depressed grief. And sort of, if there's always in a magazine, like, take a lavender bath if you're grieving. But like, if you haven't gotten out of bed for 10 days, a lavender bath is what we call contraindicated. You need a walk. You don't need more relaxation if you haven't moved in 10 days. And I will say that part was something that I did not really deeply understand, the like fundamental bioscience of movement. I mean, I always exercised because I knew it was good for me, but I had never gotten under the hood to understand how it drives hormonal development and how, like, if you want to be able to sleep, you actually have to exercise. And then we talk about nourishment. What are you eating? What are you taking into your system? Because a lot of people are like, I'm going to stay up as late as I want because I don't feel like going to sleep. And I'm only going to eat banana bread because, I went through something bad. And I'm not going to tell you not to do that. I just want you to know that if you only eat banana bread, you don't have the fat that you need or the amino acids that you need to create the hormonal response that serotonin needs to create inside your body. So the bioscience is something we could teach people before they grieve. And I feel like, hey, if I did that on a college level, like kids 20 years old and teaching you what you need to know, those same kids are going to then become the titans of industry who decide what our bereavement leave policies look like, decide what our work hours look like. And there is such a clear misunderstanding of what people are going through when they're like, but you had 5 days off.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
And I love that back to basics almost, because it's those things that get lost, don't they? I think when we lose a significant person in our lives, that we don't care enough to want to prepare the food. And, especially, if you've lost a life partner and you're suddenly cooking for one person, and the meal times, it's so hard to find the desire to feed yourself. And and I've had Sabine Horner on the podcast before, talking about nutrition and the effects of grief on our digestive system. And eating things like soups and smoothies can be so helpful because it just gets that nutrition in. And like you say, don't not eat the things you need to eat that bring you a bit of comfort, but make sure that you're getting the
That's
goodness
what I always
in
say.
as well.
It's like, eat the garbage. I don't care about that. Eat the pizza.
Yeah.
Also, can you drink this green smoothie?
Yes. Yeah. And getting outside, moving your body, God, the hormones, the impact on the body, on our nervous system, that there's so much in these things, but yet they can be the hardest things to do for ourselves.
They're so critically important, because what they are is like, the image that I use is like, you went overboard. And for some people, you went suddenly overboard. And for other people, you kind of knew, right? Like, so you knew that someone was going to die. And for other people, it was like, you got a phone call and you went overboard. And there's the early days of trying not to drown. And so that's the stuff where it's like, we really can teach culturally what it's like to be in a human body, because human bodies are generalizable across cultures, across genders. The whole thing. We can say, like, here's what's going on with their brain. Here's what's going on with their body. Here's what's going on. And we can teach grievers, like, I know that's really awful, and you're not going to want to take this walk, but you got to do it. You got to do it. And if you don't do it today, I get it. I understand, but I'm still going to encourage you to do it tomorrow, because it's good for you. And I know you don't want to see your sister and you don't want to see your cousin Linda. I totally get it. Our desire to isolate and keep ourselves in a protective bubble, but also you have to see them. That's the kind of like understanding, right? Like, most people eat vegetables not because they love them. They would rather eat the cupcakes. They eat them because they know they're good for them. And they eat them because they believe that they need to take care of their body. There's a different way to take care of a body when it's in trauma. And then so when we're able to get some kind of central nervous system stabilization, right? And when people are always like, how long is this going to take? What I really think they're asking me is, when am I going to have some sort of central nervous system stabilization? And I'm like, look, I can give you 1,000 exercises. Some of them you're going to hate. Every time I'm teaching, I'm like, a small percentage of you are going to hate this exercise. Do not do it. It is not for you. The other percentage, I want you to try it and then just rank it. Keep it in your bucket if it works for you. If not, move on. Your grieving process is not externally located in my expertise. I'm just giving you 1,000 things to try, so that it's like a menu. It's like, what do you want to eat? I don't know. I know you don't know, because your brain is compromised right now, and imagining is not high on the list of what your brain can do. It can't imagine what you might want. So I'm giving you a menu of things that it's like, these are the things that people have done that are they say support them in their grief. And that list that I have, by the way, has everything from like hot yoga to promiscuous sex. Like, it has all the things. I'm not here to judge you.
No,
I'm not here to judge. And I love when someone tells me something and I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea that would be helpful. People will say to me, Meghan, washing dishes is so helpful to me in my grief. And then I want to get into it. Like, are you washing dishes in a mindful way? Meaning like, you're able to tolerate this moment and be in your body and you're feeling the water. Or are you washing dishes in a totally dissociative way? Both can be good, but people don't always know the difference. Like, are you watching TV because it's reminding you of when you used to feel good, and it's giving you something to think about, and it's a lovely distraction, and you're here under a warm blanket? Or are you watching TV so that you don't have to feel anything else for a really long time, which is how more of us. So is it dissociative, or is it helping you in the present moment? When people are able to tolerate the present moment a little bit better, and it is not their fault that they can't. My assistant wrote to me this morning about my mom, and I was like, I'm going to say it again. I know she's dead. I still cannot believe it.
Yeah.
Some days I'm like, no, that happened. But today is one of those days where I'm like, what the actual fuck? Yes. Where is that lady? How is it possible she hasn't been in my life for 6 years? Yeah. At some point, when we have enough stabilization, which, by the way, is not anywhere near enough for our lives to have a good life, people start having to move into a life without what they were attached to. And that is a becoming process. And that is fucking brutal, because that's if I am not married anymore, if my husband died, am I still married?
Yeah.
Am I a wife?
Yeah.
It's an identity component.
Yeah.
Then you're looking at stuff like, do I even believe in God? What kind of a God would let a child die of leukemia? Like, do I have a spiritual connection? It's that work. Like, can I go back to doing, accounting? Does accounting even matter? Am I gonna be an accountant now?
Yeah.
That whole element of like, and now you end up in your life, and you're not back in your life because it's not the same.
Yeah.
But how do I live this life? That's it's almost like early grief to me is central nervous system regulation and stabilization of trauma. And then the second piece is the like, how are you going to do this?
Yeah.
How are you going to find that part that David Kessler talks about, which is a life that has meaning? And I don't mean to say there's meaning in your person's death, because that's bullshit. I mean, your life still can have some meaning, even though they are no longer a living part of it.
So true. You've said that we go to therapists for support in our grief, but therapists aren't trained. So what are the things that therapists are doing that aren't helpful, and what could be different? What can we do to change that?
I have supervised therapists for many years. And one of the hardest moments for a therapist is when they are also overwhelmed by what you are overwhelmed by, which happens really often. So you come in and you're really anxious because you think you might get fired. And the therapist suddenly is like, oh my God, we got to keep you from getting fired. And so when I'm training people, I'm like, no, you have to unblend from their experience. And then we teach you, what do we do with someone who's deeply anxious? So the therapist has this whole host of tools that are going to manage their own anxiety in that moment. You're going to tell your client to start to take some deep breaths. You're going to ground them to the floor. You're going to ask them, what would happen if you lost your job? You give them a whole series of tools, and it helps them and it helps the client. When it comes to the death of a child, when it comes to the death of a partner, and your client comes in and their whole life has fallen apart, those therapists are just as helpless as you are. They don't know what to do. And so what they do, what we're trained in, is to just sort of like validate your experience, which works in the early days. In fact, most of Instagram and most of TikTok is sort of like, just be with your feelings, feel your feelings, which I think has a real therapy tone to it that makes me crazy. It sort of hold space. I have a guy that listens to my podcast who's like, no one knows what hold space means. Like, give me a practical, tell me what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And the problem with the like, just validate feelings and feel your feelings is that if somebody is feeling helpless and I say, God, it really makes sense that you're feeling helpless. And then they come in next week and they're feeling helpless, or they're feeling like this is so unfair. And all we do for 50 minutes is feel the injustice of it. We are actually locking in a narrative of their loss. And so therapists need to be trained how to validate and pull forward. And I'll be honest, most of how I learned how to do that was becoming a trauma therapist. So a trauma is like a bad thing that happens. COVID was a global trauma. But not everyone is traumatized by a trauma. So traumatized is when the energy lands inside your system and makes your life less good forever.
Okay.
Right? So traumatized is what we are looking to not be by our person's death. Right? Never ever have a good day of life since they died is sort of the most concrete definition of traumatized. What a therapist needs to do is be with the person in the moment and offer them the hope that there is something on the other side if they push and grow. And in trauma work, we say, I know that you don't want to do this. Can I speak to the 1% that believes that there might be some possibility? And can that 1% do X, Y, and Z? So we're always pulling and pushing and reflecting and saying, what would happen? Is there a part of you, right?
Yeah.
I'm just looking for a 2% shift. But I learned
Yeah.
that from trauma work.
Mm.
And what I would say, most grief work, when you read about it in books, and again, my colleagues that I've already named aside, they are doing extraordinary work. But a lot of what happens in grief work is we just sort of end at the everybody feels comforted by understanding that they're not the only person going through this. And that's incredible goodness.
Yeah.
But it still is, when you're bringing people together, all of whom who lost children, they are spending that whole weekend or that 72 hours in the experience of their loss. And which is important because it's real. But when we're integrating loss, it's, and then what? And how do we move forward?
Yeah.
With respect, right? So,
Yeah.
a lot of what we, in the mentor method, there's an R in there, MENTOR. R is ritual. So I encourage people to have a grief ritual that's daily.
Yeah.
And also a big anniversary moment. I'm going to eat some cheesecake this week, today, because it's my mom's anniversary and she used to eat cheesecake for breakfast. But I also, usually drink, my friend Hillary Phillips taught me this, quiet coffee with my mom and write to her most mornings. I just write her a note, like, here's what happened. And yeah, I usually don't even make it through the whole cup of coffee. Like, I just sort of talk to her maybe for like 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But that's my grief practice. I figured out that writing was an intuitive tool for me.
Yes.
What didn't work for me? Talk therapy. I didn't want to fucking talk about it.
Okay.
I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to dance. I wanted to listen to music. I wanted to write poetry. I wanted to read. But when people were like, oh, tell me about it, I was like, I really don't fucking want to. I don't want to. I didn't want their responses. I didn't want their soothing tones of voice. It made me mad. I was mad all the time.
Yeah. And I think, that's really powerful, isn't it? And this is, something I try and get across to the ladies in my program, my membership, is to, there's so much information out there if you want to go and find it. And there are so many tips and tools and strategies and mindset shifts that you can apply, but you don't do all of them. Like you've said,
No.
Find the ones that work for you. And intuitively trust what feels right for you and what doesn't, and don't put pressure on yourself to feel like, well, she's doing this, and I've read this book and they've said that this is really helpful, and you kind of have to go inwards a bit, don't you, and try and connect with your truth and what brings you comfort.
And I think you have to, if possible, give yourself a lot of flexibility. So I use this example a lot because it just blew my mind. It was like a part of my own teenage life that I hadn't really thought about. But my daughter's 17, so about 2 years ago, she did this thing where, like, one day she came downstairs and she was wearing a dress that looked like Anne of Green Gables, like puffy sleeves. She looked like she was going to go work on the Pioneers. And I was like, wow, okay. And then the next day she came down wearing what she would have called a shirt, I would have called a bra, and exercise shorts and like spicy little sneakers, and went to school. And I was like, oh, okay. And then the next day she went and spent time with a friend, and she came back with like black nails and was like wearing a cape. And I was like, she does not have a stabilized sense of identity right now. And so she is literally trying things on to see what fits.
Yeah.
And when we teach the grief mentor method, it's this simple. It's like, here are the 6 core components. So here are 6 areas for you to explore. I don't care which one you pick. I do think that you have to have a mindfulness component, because I do think you have to be connected to the energy, or it's really going to be too much guesswork. Then you just come up, you tell me what idea you have of something that might be supportive. Not healing, not going to take away your grief, but just like something today in this moment that you think might support you in your grief experience. And it might be as simple as, I'm going to call my friend and we're going to take a walk. Amazing. That's co-regulating your energy with another person, and it's moving the energy through you with bilateral stimulation of walking. I always tell them the science. Look at you, little scientist. You came up with something to try. And now go do it. Go
Yes.
actually do the experiment. And people will come back and be like, that fucking sucked. My friend did not stop talking about her husband the whole time. And my husband is dead. And now I never want to speak to her again. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, guess what? Let's not do a walk with that friend again. So that experiment, we have some data on it. It wasn't great. So do you want to never take another walk with a friend? Do you want to try a walk with a different friend? Do you want to move away from taking walks and maybe go swimming or do something else? But you can hear that inherent is the expectation that you're going to fail.
Yes.
Because when we're taking risks to become something, it's
Mm.
brutal to fail. But we build in this like, no, oh, you are 100% going to fail. So many people tell me that they want to take a yoga class or that they're going to take a yoga. They'll text me and be like, I'm going to yoga. And I always want to ask, like, what yoga are you going to? Because we got the Ashtanga yoga, which is like sprinting. We've got yin yoga, which is like sleeping. And let's not forget there's Bikram yoga, which is 90 minutes of twisting your body into knots and being super sweaty. And people they don't know that. They only know yoga from like what they saw in a Sex and the City episode. They just think they're like on a mat, bending over. So people will come back and say to me like, why didn't anyone tell me that is the worst? Why do people say that's good? Or like, Meghan, it was silent. I couldn't sit still on my mat. It made me panicky. Like, okay, well then we need movement, babe. We can't have stillness.
Yeah.
So it's always this like becoming, and I try to instill the idea of like, listen, how could you possibly know how to do this?
Yeah.
Like with my mom, I lived 45 years on the earth every single day of my life with her as part of like, my compass point.
Yes.
It was really not that shocking that I was totally lost.
No, not at all.
But I need people to say to me, here's how you might want to try recalibrating your instruments.
Yes.
And and there really wasn't anyone helping me
doing
with that. Yeah.
So is all grief trauma?
It's such a good question. So trauma, now you will get different answers. Like Mary Frances and I have different answers about this. Mary Frances' answer is, I think, more true than this scientific answer, which people will say that trauma has to threaten your life in order to qualify as trauma. And I just don't think that's true.
Okay.
The way that I have been taught about trauma is a bad event and you are the one that defines it. So your, football coach yelling at you when you were in grade 7 and humiliating you in front of the whole rest of the team defined whether or not you played sports for the rest of your life. You were traumatized by that, by him yelling at you. Because you took sports, which you used to love, off the table and your life now lives without sports. Right?
Yes.
So that's, in my mind, a trauma is a bad thing that happened. Traumatized is the meaning that you make from that. So some people have a lot of growth from trauma. In fact, many grievers I know, when they begin that part where they're starting to live with their loss, they discover that like they're more intentional about their friendships. They're shifting how they're doing their work. They are taking better care of their body. It's not only bad stuff. There is this traumatic growth, not for everybody, but for a lot of people that I talk to. So trauma in a very simple way is a bad thing that happened, which means again, grief is the energy that's created on account of loss. Yes. All loss is a trauma. Even if you see it coming, all loss has an energy that registers with you in a negative way. You lose something with that. Yes. The degree to which the detachment impacts you kind of depends on your history with, childhood trauma, with how attached you were to the person, with how you learned the information, what kind of a death they had. All of that will impact, how hard it hits you, how hard a gong hit you take.
And talking to the ladies in my community, obviously, there's a lot of trauma in sudden death. There's also a lot of trauma in caring for somebody at end of life, isn't there? And you're going into grief, traumatized, before the trauma of the grief, and
it's all garbage.
Yeah, it is. And what do we do with? I mean, I know there's the basic things that we can do to support ourselves in our grief, but it's twofold. Maybe this question: what do we do with that trauma, and how do we know whether we need something more for the trauma that we are experiencing, or how traumatized are there levels? How do we
it's such
measure
a
this
question. So I like to answer these questions like really simply. So again, in Can Anyone Tell Me, the last couple of chapters of the book are this, which is like, how do I know when I need help? Like the chapter headings are funny, right? Like how, why is my brain broken? Why do smart people say stupid things? Why do I think that butterfly is my mom? But at the end, it gets a little more serious, which is like, what do I do? Here's what I'll say was the threshold for me. If your central nervous system, which is your brain and your spine, so your thoughts and your body, your feelings and your senses, if they are much worse 3 months out, go talk to somebody. Go talk to anybody you can talk to. Go talk to somebody about the fact that your physical system is ringing more like a gong than it was even in the first days. Just to let them figure it out. Let them because they will ask questions, and you can always go talk to somebody who is trained in trauma. So again, in the back of the book, it tells you, ask them if they have these certifications, and they will be able to answer that question. So if you aren't sure, you don't need to be sure, right?
Yes.
If your elbow hurt and you weren't sure if you had a torn ligament, you just go to a doctor, and they'd be like, no, it isn't. But go ask somebody, are these symptoms? Because what ends up happening is people don't go ask. It's 18 months later. They haven't slept well in 18 months, and they don't realize it's because their dad died. Because it's so long ago now. No one's talking to them like it's a significant event. But again, things like not sleeping are driven by hormone disruption. And so you might need intervention. So what I would say is be the kindest to yourself possible. You don't have to earn help and support.
No.
But if you're having physical symptoms or distorted thinking, those ruminations where they're like, it's like you have a friend that, like a bully in your mind that's telling you really bad stuff. If only you had just called them, then this thing wouldn't have happened.
Yes.
If that is beating you up, hundreds of times a day, go see a trauma therapist. You deserve support. There's lots of things that we can do to help. It's very common to have those thoughts. But most people's minds will integrate those thoughts and understand, like, sometimes my mind says shitty things, but there's a percentage of people, I was one of them, where that mind, anytime your mind is quiet, is like, it's your fault. It's your fault. And that will make you, it's a disrespectful word, but it'll make you crazy. It'll make your brain break. So what I would say to folks is, and then if you're not sure, go to a support group. Go to a widow's support group. And when you're in that room, you'll either feel like, oh my God, I found my people. Or you'll feel like, God, I am worse than these folks. I am not doing it. They seem to be a little bit more okay than me. And again, it's not about your failing because you went through a loss. That's bullshit. There's no such thing. It's what you need, right? And it doesn't matter. It's like, how high is your hunger? It doesn't matter why you're hungry. It doesn't matter if it's because you didn't eat since breakfast or you haven't eaten in 5 days. You still got to feed the hunger.
Yes.
So that's what I would say, is that there's a lot of support out there. It's not that easy to find. And so when your little support friends, when they're saying, what can I do? Tell them, I need a therapist. I need one for my kid. I need some books. I need some podcasts. I need put them on it. Make them find the help and support. They'll be grateful to have something concrete to do, and they'll be able to do a better job of seeking it because they have more energy than you do right now.
And I think this is a thing, isn't it? It's helping the people around us to become more educated around grief and loss, so that they can support us, but they feel more comfortable in that as well, because it is a minefield, isn't it? And it's a scary place for people to sit in.
It is, but also, God, it's brutal to have to teach someone while you're in it.
Isn't it?
I say it in the book, which is like, I'm sorry you're going to have to do this, but that's the way it is. And until we shift culture, until everybody, my kids, all of them, when they were like 9, 10, or 11, took a health class that taught them about puberty. Until we have at age 20, or when you're in college, here's the class you have to take about profound loss. Until we have that, we're going to have to teach the people around us how to support us.
It kind of baffles me that we are not taught more about resilience, or self-care, how to recognize when there's an imbalance in our mental, physical well-being, and how we, I guess, approach life's challenges and tragedies, because they're going to come. Like none of us get out of this without being impacted in some way. We've got to be able to educate people younger, so that we have the tools to support us.
We can. We definitely can. We just don't. And I honestly, my soapbox for the rest of my life will be, create grief education so that people are aware of what the general norms are for themselves and the rest of the community. Because I actually think it's a social justice issue. Yes. I think some populations are served by other people going down real hard. And, when you look at who has difficulty with grieving their mother's death, it's often people who had destabilization and trauma in childhood. So parents who were addicted, parents who were ill, they were in foster care, there was a death already in their family. Like, in my mind, there is a more insidious reason why we don't provide support. Because we're comfortable. We're comfortable with the people who are struggling.
It's so sad, isn't it? It's so sad that it's that way. Your book, Can Anyone Tell Me? I think it's brilliant, isn't it? In that you've put it into easy to read sections with, like you say, with the questions, the headings, because like you say, when we're grieving, our brain is mush. We're not able to sit down and always read an actual book. And you have taken so much of your own experience of working with people in grief, the regular challenges that we face, but there's also stuff in there for supporters, and you can pick it up and you can just read the sections that are appropriate to you at that time, that might help you, that might help the people around you. Genius, Meghan.
I wrote it like what to expect when you're expecting, this idea of like, you're not trying to read this cover to cover, you're trying to get an answer. And I really was trying to be sensitive to our brains cannot read very well for the most part right now. We're not trying to be overwhelmed. And I really wanted people, because the supporters of grievers are always saying like, do you have anything for me? And so I just wanted them to, everybody needs the same damn information. So there you go. So thank you for saying that. That's what
amazing. So that's obviously available, isn't it, for people? It's on Amazon.
It is. Yes. Yeah. And we're offering classes in the mentor method and training for people. If you come over to my Instagram or my website, and for folks that are in the US, we have in November, we have a book festival, the Grieftastic Book Festival, that you can join us in LA. Meet 35 authors and grief experts and come and have brunch and meet everybody. It sounds sad, but I'm telling you, it's like a raucous time of laughter and deep connection. It's really a powerful time.
It is. And we were saying, weren't we, before we came on to record, that actually when you bring grievers together, I always notice it in my retreats, my events, there is so much laughter.
So much laughter.
They're fun.
They need it.
They are fun, and it's all part of it. But Meghan, thank you so much for coming along and sharing.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for everything you're doing to help folks in the face of grief and loss.
You're a star. Thanks, Meghan.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to the Widow Podcast with me, Karen Sutton. If you would like more support, head to karensutton.co.uk. or explore the many other episodes for more conversations and support. You can do so much to help you take steps forward towards a brighter future, and I'd love to help you do that.